the 26th of July, 2023. Welcome, everybody. I'm Dana Durnford, also known as the nuclearproctologist.org. And you can call or text 709-589-4406. 4406 on this Wednesday. Consider subscribing or liking or notifying or even all of them. I won't tell anybody, and you can be sure they're listening. We all had a great day, if that's possible. Somebody should have a great day, because I certainly didn't. As is the case. The oceans where I'm to currently are the greatest temperature increase in North America. And you know, from the videos that I've posted where I show the GPS with the temperature on it, that's underwater temperatures. These are extraordinary temperatures we're seeing down there. And we went to go out today, and the motor doesn't want to go down. And I'm assuming it's the pump. And normally the pumps, they have a relief valve so you can drop the motor. Mine, and I changed the anodes, the zincs on the boat. But the electrolysis still ate away at that part because it was white metal. And so you can't even do it manually. And so I don't know what's going on for sure, but I'm going to have to deal with it, whatever it is. So with the warmest temperatures down here, we got a complete failure of the bird colonies on top of that. Let me fix that. And fix your shit, Dana. What am I doing here? Wrong one. Fix that one. Okay, anyway we go. Let's try it again. So the surface temperatures are increasing following a week of heat and humidity. A lousy week of temperatures, and Lord knows I complained about it every day, has caused the oceans to be the hottest temperature in North America. Does anybody actually believe that nonsense? Is there anybody who believes that on the entire planet? Following a week of heat? But that's the official story. That's the government's official story. Bear with me. I screwed up. One of the few things I'm good at. I should be a professional screw-up. I'd have 30,000 people here watching this show instead of 11. I'd rather have the 11 that are here than the 30,000 that are not, if you know what I mean. Following a week of heat, I said surface temperatures from 18 to 20 degrees Celsius are abnormally warm. Now, we showed this before the heat showed up, right, in May. Said surface temperatures from 18 to 20 degrees. The water continues to be warmed, and then at the end of the season, we should be worried. So, like normally, if they do warm up, it won't be till the end of summer, basically. And you need a lot of things to play into it. So if you have a major storm coming through with all this temperature, you know you're going to get catastrophic damage, is what we're seeing. when we see storms rolling through anywhere with these places, this is a direct result of 80 years of emissions from nuclear power plants, dumping, major events. There's 100 plus whales washed up in Australia. 51 are dead. There's 2,000 penguins yesterday that washed up dead. And nobody knows why. I'm assuming they're emaciated. We only got one story on it. The story showed up, the exact same story in a few places, but it was just the same story, right? It was an unusual picture. They're not actually stranded, they're huddling. And then they just raced into the shoreline and beached themselves. We have unusual mortality events for right whales, humpback whales, grey whales, fin whales, for beak whales, for all kinds of species, for mollusks, etc., etc. And we will, it's pretty humble what I'm doing on its own, no matter how you look at it. It's a very humble thing that I do each day. And the research, getting out and doing the research is what it's all about. And when you can't even do that, it's just mind-numbing. We got most of the stuff showed up that I ordered in, and I got two of the bikes, the solenoids went on it. And when I went out this morning, not only did my truck, it was dead flat, and it's currently on the charger still. I gave it a boost and used it, but you still got to charge up the battery, right? And one of the bikes, I changed the solenoid, that was okay. The other one, the battery was dead on that. That's a brand new battery we bought 3 weeks ago. And I cannibalized acid from another battery last night and put it on the charger, and it's basically a trickle charger. And when I went out today, it was 14 amps. It was still charging, but it shouldn't, because it's just a 10 amp battery, right? And the solenoid it's the wrong solenoid for that bike, but it won't start now. So it's a pretty tough day. And we got to deal with it. We got no other options. We're literally just limping along at this stage. Japan considers financial aid for utilities to upgrade existing nuclear power plants. These power plants have all been shut down since 2011. And so why don't they consider financial aid for geothermal or for storage for the renewables? They got 2 gigawatts of wind and solar shut down because it's competing with nuclear. It's tough. It's been a very tough year for me. Last year was really bad too. This one kicked off with 3 heart attacks, and I had to get 7 stents put in. And so I'm running on empty every day anyway. I'm definitely on borrowed time. But I feel half human if I at least do this each day. At least I'm trying to make the world something better. At least I'm trying to do something that is worthy. And this is 100% worthy, unfortunately. Power utilities facing higher energy costs. This was because they artificially inflated so when Russia, which was a scripted invasion of Ukraine, happened, there was artificial inflation worldwide because they banned the commodities from Russia, and they couldn't get it from anywhere else. Russia didn't care, they just sold to somebody else. And that created this artificial inflation for 195 countries, because all countries that were stupid enough to be hooked into UN were obliged apparently to impoverish their countries by this artificial inflation, by banning commodities you couldn't replace. They didn't ban nuclear fuel from Russia, but they banned everything else. Japan is already set to introduce a new auction program in January next year. So they're way behind. Like, all the reactors they're talking about are very old reactors. They were around 40 years of age when they shut down in 2011. The neutron bombardment doesn't go away. Industry's ministry proposed on Wednesday to alter the scheme so that existing nuclear power plants can take part in the auction, receive financial support, but they won't put any money. They could replace everything they got there with geothermal. YouTube partner program contract has been terminated. They terminated my YouTube partner program contract today. Just to top it off for me. Let's shit on data just a little bit more. Long after Oppenheimer, the U.S. is still paying benefits to people who were exposed to radiation from nuclear tests. Long after Oppenheimer. Long after Oppenheimer. They'll be doing that till we're all dead and gone, basically. So worldwide, the nuclear detonations were equal to, that they admit to, that we know about, not counting dumping and constant emissions from 1,000 fuel pools every day, or all the nuclear meltdowns that happened and that they didn't acknowledge publicly. But just the nuclear so-called test was equal to 36,000 Nagasaki bombs, because Nagasaki was a plutonium bomb. Hiroshima was a uranium bomb. It's just the fallout is what, bombs are bombs, right? But the fallout is still, no matter which way you look at it, is really bad, but plutonium is significantly worse. And uranium ain't no cakewalk, right? Decades after Oppenheimer, the U.S. is still paying benefits. Like, they're only going to cover, like, the government employees, not going to cover the victims. Now, if you work at Hanford for 8 hours, that's it. And if you worked there 50 years ago, 60 years ago, you're actually entitled to a pension. All you had to do was work there for 8 hours. You don't have to prove you got sick because you worked there. You just had to work there for 8 hours. This is why they use a lot of day workers, immigrants, and victims of society, so the insurance company doesn't catch up to them eventually. Civilians who contracted cancer or other diseases due to the nuclear testing also receive benefits, but it's just a fraction, and the majority of them have died since then. Verified human. WorldCoin, whatever the hell that one is, users query up for iris scans. Turns out that the founder, Sam Altman, was the CEO of Chat, artificial intelligence Chat GPT. So now they're giving people worthless coins if they give them an iris scan. And they're speculative that they'll grow in value over time, right? Shrugging off concerns about privacy campaign, says it aims to create a new identity and financial network. So like, private companies shouldn't be allowed to go out and play with your identities and creating new identities and stealing your eyeballs, which, as anybody knows, that's important documentation. That's an incredibly important digital footprint. And who know what they're capable of scanning when you do that. The project launched on Monday with eyeball scans taking place in countries including Britain, Japan, India. There's a risk with having the data of your own eyes collected by a company with no incentive not to be evil with it. And then you get a t-shirt and a sticker saying verified humans. Verified human afterwards. A 34-year-old graphic designer was taking part in it, declined to give his full name because of privacy reasons, but yet gave away his privacy. For many years, there was a promise of financial gains from the crypto coins was enough to make them hand over their personal data. They had not read the WorldCoin's private policy, says the data may pass to subcontractors and can be, if it could be accessed by governments and the authorities, it will be. Reporting by, and look at all the people so proud of themselves, they put their name on the story. Japan's experimental fast breeder reactor passes screening these breeder reactors, they produce, you can actually make fuel with the isotopes they're producing. That's what it's all about, right? So instead of having to mine uranium and process it, the breeder reactor is designed that you can reclaim the emissions and turn it into fuel. And so a single breeder reactor theoretically can fuel most of the disease factories in your country, the power plants. These are disease factories. It's the problem with the anthropogenic man-made isotopes is they're 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. So that's a huge problem, right? And you have no autoimmune trigger to defend against it, neither does any of the species. The species should be coming first. Use plutonium extracted, and to get it running, they're using plutonium, so they're using mixed oxide fuel on the experimental breeder reactor in a country that's already polluted the entire planet. Oh, I missed that headline by the looks of it. So South Korea, there's a, no, that's the headline there, I got it highlighted. The major media was labeled a loudspeaker in South Korea for scaremongering rumors at a debate co-hosted by the People Power Party and conservative groups. Several media outlets reported that Hank Yorek was labeled a loudspeaker for scaremongering rumors at a debate on Wednesday concerning the release of radioactive wastewater from Fukushima. And the problem with the, right, they're trying to bully the planet, and it doesn't matter if it works or not, they're going to do it anyway. They're trying to bully the planet into acquiescing that Japan can dump the water that's been dumped for 12 years. They've been dumping it for 12 years. There's nothing in the tanks. The tanks were actually built for this purpose, to manipulate you into thinking that everything in the tank. And South Korea is so insane, their public relation, that they're claiming that nothing got out of the buildings. These are just two of them. There's nothing left of them. But the official story that came out less than a month ago is 2.2 grams is all that got out of these buildings. Each building had around 10 million pounds because the fuel, they had two fuel pools at the top of each building, And they were stuffed with reactor cores because they don't have a repository, let alone anywhere else on the planet. And we have the documentation to back up these assertions, by the way. And so each building was around 10 million pounds. But now, which is 20 million pounds, you're talking about, it makes Chernobyl look like it didn't even happen. Chernobyl was brutal. But it's nothing compared to Fukushima. But yet, Chernobyl, they closed 9,400 farms in Ireland and in Scotland and the United Kingdom. Which they should have closed everything and abandoned them. If you can't, the radiation just doesn't seek out farms. So officially, the story, you're only allowed to say that there's 2.2 grams got out. It's only tritium, and it's in the 1,000 tanks. If you say anything else, you're scaremongering. According to the report during a discussion in National Assemblies on the spread of rumors, like this is somehow rumors. Eh? They won't omit these pictures, by the way. The director of Citizens Actions for Fair Media claims for Fair Media. They're the last ones worried about fair media. After the March Korea-Japan summit, the Democratic Party began to spread scaremongering rumors, and two medias conspired to expand on and repeat the rumors, as well as acting as loudspeakers, disseminating them even further. You're only allowed to report on the official story. You're not allowed to acknowledge the real story. What a stupid country. The Hank found the 2020 report the government was referring to and confirmed that it was not concerned with verifying the performance of the ALPS. Like, how come the ALPS hasn't been repeated in every country with nuclear worldwide? Well, because it doesn't work. And the ALPS is supposed to be a water filtration system. And so now they say it's difficult to believe the International Atomic Energy Agency did not verify the performance of ALPS. Well, first off, they're not a regulator. They have no authority or no sovereignty over any country. They're just a little extension of the military-industrial complex known as United Nations, formerly pre-Hiroshima Nagasaki, known as the League of Nations. It's a takeover of Earth, and they don't want the species, apparently. The purpose of the analyst was to confirm the reliability of TEPCO's analysts, not to verify the ALPS. If these articles are scaremongering rumors, then Hank should be called a producer of such hoaxes, not a loudspeaker. It is an even greater insult to our paper and its journalists to call them loudspeakers, gadgets that simply amplify incoming signals without judgments. Well, that is what a journalist is. A journalist's job is to stab everybody into the back, and everybody thanks him for it. We got a poll, by the way, tonight. Did I bring that up? I can't remember. Should it be a crime to pretend Fukushima Reactor 3 and 4, which are these two buildings right there, 3 to your left and 4 to your right, there's nothing left. Should that be a crime to pretend that the Reactor 3 and 4 reactors still had fuel pools after the nuclear meltdown? Because that's what they've done. Of course, I'll be called a fearmonger and making salacious rumors for suggesting that. They'll be calling for my head before I know it. So, should it be a crime to to pretend that Fukushima Reactor 3 and the Reactor 4 still had fuel pools. I'm just going to play this 38-second clip of 4 major medias claiming they're in the fuel pool.
Where I'm standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
So how many people thinks that they're in the fuel pool at the top, 100 feet above the wreckage to your left? Anybody? You can call in at 709-589-4406. (709-589-4406) if you think that the people are in the fuel pool at the top of the building to your left. Oh, to be insane. So reactor 3 and 4, if you stack them on top of each other, is less than the height of that. And that is the bottom piece that you can't see in this picture of reactor 1 at the same site, which is 190 feet tall, 150 feet wide. So it's hard to appreciate, but when you look at this picture, you can appreciate how big it is. And that is actually taller than 2 of them stacked on each other. Yet they're claiming that they're at the very top of the building that actually doesn't exist. Should that be a crime? And we know where it went. It covered the planet in about 19 days, 19.5 days according to that media. Verifying the performance of the ALPS system. Let me just quickly show you the short version of that documentation, so you don't get hopefully you don't get confused when you read their propaganda. There you go. Yeah, that plays out. Here we go. That looks okay. So, the ALPS system, 2014, three years, 1 month later, had yet to function. So you had water for 3 years straight that had no filtration. But there was also another filtration system called the Irwin system. And in 2014, in August, 3.5 years later, it still hadn't worked. So you had the ALPS system, or the Revis system didn't work, the ALPS system didn't work, and you had the series system supposed to extract cesium-137, the great fable, which is the one they've been using to manipulate you with it's a very bad isotope, But the biggest byproduct of radiated fuel rods is the curium isotopes. TEPCO plans to dump the water, this is 2013, at Fukushima Daiichi. Now, I just showed you the ALPS and the Uriva system didn't work. The plant has already released enormous amounts of highly contaminated water directly into the ocean from a plethora of leaks from the reactor buildings. After the water passes through the crippled units, every time I hear the word crippled, it upsets me big time. It is processed through the series system to remove cesium, but other systems designed to remove other radioactive materials have been overwhelmed by the complexity and concentrations of contamination found at Fukushima Daiichi. You can't filter it because you can never change the filter. After 20 minutes, you can't get back in the building. Like the glassification site at Hanford, you can't get back in it once you turn it on. And you can't change the filter because it's a lethal dose from hundreds of yards away. You're talking about thousands of sieverts per filter, and they're not 6 feet thick of lead. EU Energy Commissioner called Fukushima an apocalypse. Everything is out of control. Like what? Like my life right now, everything is out of control. France says Japan has lost control, and the French, I shouldn't say that though. Japan is trillions and trillions of times worse than me. I withdraw the comment. I apologize for saying that. France says Japan has lost control and that the French should leave the country. France. When it kept their mouth shut ever since, of course. Swiss embassy evacuates Tokyo fearing radiation. Fukushima is very uncertain. And so, haven't seen a single wasp this year so far. We're way in the summer, right? And just before we went live, I had a wasp in the other room here. And I had a glass, and I wanted to catch him, so I closed the door to the studio so it wouldn't fly in the studio, and turned around, I can't find him. So he's around here somewhere. He might show up, because it's pretty bright in this room. Swiss embassy evacuates, but that's the first wasp I've seen. I can't kill him. I got to catch him and give him the big release. The Swiss embassy evacuates Tokyo. So did all the different countries, Canadian, Australian, all the different countries evacuated the embassies in Tokyo. Tokyo's lost almost all control of the events of Fukushima. Nuclear report warns of an apocalyptic scenario. This could one day be considered the start. This is the ambassador. This could one day be considered the start of the ultimate catastrophe of the entire planet. Officials are unsure what to do next. Korea calls Japan's handling of Fukushima incompetent. But the current administration says they're perfect. Japan professor, this is a rare one. 1,000 years from now, contaminated water from Fukushima may be still hemorrhaging into the Pacific Ocean. And the last one, water above 1 sievert per hour. It was actually 2.2 sieverts of beta per liter. So lethal doses by the liter. Just walking past a few liters will kill you. It's like a sniper round if you got 5 gallons of it. SBS cited the results of a single contaminated water sample analyzed as the basis for its conclusion that it's difficult to believe the International Atomic Energy Agency did not verify the performance of the ALPS. Which is a great point because the International Atomic Energy Agency didn't take their own samples. They've only been there 4 times in 12 years, and all of them were within the last year. I hate their guts with a passion. They're so evil. It would take you 8 or 10 shows just to show you that the documentation of how actual evil they really are. The purpose of the analyst was to confirm the reliability of TEPCO's analyst, not verify the ALPS. So they asked a criminal for the samples rather than taking samples themselves. So to call themselves, well, not them, but the media refers to them as a regulatory agency, as the top tier of regulatory, but they're not. They're not a regulatory agency. They don't have any authority. If these articles are scaremongering rumors, then the Hanks should be called a producer of such hoaxes. Well, just... Let me just expand on that for 1 second, in case there's confusion, because the industry's done everything it could to make sure you get confused. It's really easy, if you listen to their version, to never have a hope and hell of understanding the true story. I went past it. Here we go. We'll get there. So officially, about 3.5 weeks ago, South Korea and Australia and Britain came out and claimed that there's 1,000 tanks and they got 2.2 grams of tritium in the 1,000 tanks. And thank goodness they got it all in the tanks. And it's going to take 30 years to release it. And they're going to release 0.062 grams per year from buildings that don't even exist anymore and have lost 10 million pounds each. And so anybody that wavers from that narrative is set up on by the goblins from the industry. Japan's nuclear wastewater discharge provokes worldwide protest. The International Atomic Energy's role is to analyze and confirm the data provided by TEPCO, not directly collect samples and verify them themselves. And another story from 2019 was 105,000 storage sites throughout the prefecture where they picked up 30 million one-ton bags of radiation at 100,000 becquerels a kilogram. So they're conveniently pretending that doesn't exist anymore. And the International Atomic Energy Agency in the last number of months have come out and said that the public's trust is key to projects reusing millions of one-ton bags of radioactive soil from Fukushima. And what they've done is they cut it open and they're growing food in it. They're doing that just within the eyesight of the nuclear ongoing meltdowns and in a radioactive wasteland known as Okuma, which is just a couple of kilometers from the disease factories. The International Atomic Energy Agency is not a regulator and therefore not in a position to judge or approve Japan's soil, water, or anything else. And this is a picture from 2015 of Japan growing food alongside of one-ton bags of radiation. So there's a complete disconnect. And so when Rafael Grossi came over and said, after 2 years we verified Fukushima's discharge plan, they didn't verify anything. They didn't take any of their own samples. And it was a big hoax. And the current president of South Korea, if you go back to 2021 when he was running for the presidency, had said Fukushima had no meltdown. The reactors didn't collapse. Despite the fact the reactors collapsed. Right, so the official story is 2.2 grams got out of 4 melted reactors and 8 missing fuel pools. And that any fish that are being found that are irradiated are fish that are contaminated from the drains in the port in front of the nuclear power plant. Those fish must have escaped the port because you have a net there. They haven't checked it since 2015. They said, but if there is fish, they must have got out of the port. Because the official story is nothing got out of the port. And then they show you this, the drainage from a nuclear meltdown site. It's just too much. And so the new law is exceptional. Because South Korea wants to have a nuclear renaissance. And they can't have a nuclear renaissance with a pesky nuclear meltdown. EU lifts Fukushima checks, other nations raise water discharge concern. EU lifts Fukushima, well, they never actually had any checks. They had Japan rubber stamping a piece of paper saying that they checked it, right? And that's the same thing as IAEA does, is Japan gives them a piece of paper and says they checked it. And here's our numbers. They look at the numbers. They don't get a sample. They don't collect their own samples. EU doesn't collect their own samples. They don't check their own food. They have Japan check it and make sure there's a piece of paper that says it was checked and is safe. There's nobody checking. The United Nations is exterminating us through radioactive fallout and radioactive foods. The European Commission, because Fukushima is the breadbasket for Asia, but also for a lot of the world, because you produce over a billion pounds of rice each year, which you don't need a lot of exposures to make you sick for the rest of your life. There's 1,800 diseases besides cancer you got to worry about. Cancer is real, but it's usually the last one to manifest and get diagnosed. European Commission is going to lift the restrictions. The only restrictions they had was a piece of paper saying that Japan checked it. Japan is the very last place you want to trust. They're the very last. They should have a wall built right around it. The president of the EU Commission, they're not elected, they're appointed, right? And they're basically lobbyists. And there's around 950 lobbyists, and they are the so-called commission. And they had a little over 500 voted last year to call nuclear renewable. They know it's not, but because that's how it was done with a vote, they got it called that. Now, investors can invest in it and get a write-off and tax break on the investments. And they're hoping that will kickstart the nuclear industry. Nuclear industry has destroyed everybody's future, particularly the species. And you remember we covered a story at our last, I think it was our last video on die-offs. I got another one, a huge one, ready to go. I was actually going to do it tonight, and I changed my mind. My brain is rattled the last couple of days, and today was a real bad one. And I wasn't even going to do a show tonight. And I was like, no, I'll do the show because the industry wins if I don't do a show. I mean, it's pretty humble. Like you got, 20 people on the show? But you only need one or two of the policymakers to see this stuff and have another. They're not, because they're being fed propaganda too, right? And then, you're trying to educate the population so you can build up a resistance and so that they can protect themselves. And you're trying to have a presence where even if you don't watch the videos, they say, well, shit, that's a recent, that video is posted, that's a live stream from today, or that's live right now. And if you click on it and you see some of this stuff, you're like, holy shit, that's actually still important 12 years later. And what we do here is we're desperate for the world to come to its senses and fight for its existence, to fight for the species, to fight for their fresh water, and they need to do it. We have no options. We have to do that. And so they got no one to pick on top of that. There's 1,000 public relation firms. And so they got me just buried under 6 feet of misery every day. Import restrictions were removed in England, which was Boris Johnson. Well, 2 years, that was last year. 2 years before that, he removed the import restrictions on Fukushima Prefecture for baby food and cereal. So who eats all the cereal typically is the children, right? 2 years later, they removed the restrictions for adults. You tell me that's not evil. I dare you. I double dare you. So the Scotland food standards, the Food Standard Agency in Wales and in England, the United Kingdom, what's the point of them existing if they're just going to cut your throat when the one time they're supposed to protect you, they just cut your throat and walked away. Just don't care. They should be checked for the presence of radionuclides, including tritium. So all of a sudden now we're hearing the word tritium for the last 3.5 weeks. Up to that point, we barely heard it. Now all of a sudden they're saying it's tritium instead of uranium and plutonium and americium, neptunium and strontium and all the other fission products. The buildings are actually destroyed. And no one will admit it. It's the strangest thing imaginable. If we weren't actively doing this day in, day out, year after year after year after year after year, it's just pure desperation. It's still hard to believe after all these years. It's still, every time you look at these pictures, it's still hard to believe that the world thinks it looks like this, not like it actually looks like. It's very hard for me to reconcile that. Japan has called on 12 countries and regions that still had import measures in place to remove them and provide an update on the water discharge situation. Well, they haven't stopped hemorrhaging water into the environment. The buildings are completely destroyed. These are nuclear meltdowns. You can't go there. You can't pump water out of there. The hoses are lethal doses to walk past, let alone to walk over. And the fuel pools were at the very top of the buildings. There was 2 of them. They were stuffed with decades of reactor cores. So when they call on 12 countries or regions that still had import measures in place to remove them and provide an update on the water discharge situation, you're talking about complete fictional fable. You're talking about, what are you talking about? Water discharge, you haven't stopped. It's perpetual. Like nuclear is truly perpetual machine. In a communication in June to the World Trade Organization, which is United Nations, IAEA is United Nations. And Japan took South Korea to the World Trade Organization board a few years back because South Korea had a ban on their food from Fukushima nuclear wasteland. Japan said, that's illegal. You're part of the World Trade Organization. You got to take our radioactive food. The World Trade Organization said, actually, yeah, you got to take our food. So South Korea appealed it. And the next year, and there was a hold on imports till then, the next year, then they reversed their decision at the stupid, idiotic UN little puppet World Trade Organization. These are all just subsidies of the World Trade UN. You can't consider them independent because they're all the same evil entity. That's exactly what they are. Fukushima wrote, Japan top diplomat in Hong Kong accuses city officials of failing to show scientific proof behind the seafood ban. Think about that statement, and think about how bizarre it is that it made it into the media. Just using their version, not with no journalism whatsoever. But this is not a game. My eyes are a game. After I had my heart attacks, my eyesight went blunk. "21 days in intensive care. And when I came out, the first thing I realized was I can't even see the TV anymore. And the only thing I'm worried about is waking the planet up. And with my last dying breath, I would imagine I'll still be doing it. Because I just can't sit in silence.
Maybe worse than thought. Studies from last year indicate that radioactive water will contaminate the entire Pacific Ocean in just 6 years. Kim Dae-sung reports.
This graphic shows the gradual contamination of the Pacific Ocean due to leaks of radioactive water from the crippled Fukushima nuclear plant in Japan. The simulation, which was run by a German marine research institute, shows the entire Pacific waters being polluted by radioactive water in just 6 years.
In just 6 years. So I launched research expeditions year after year after year, and there was nothing easy about what I'd done, I can assure you. That was hellish.
Well, we got the big one up.
There was a hellish experience I'll never forget. And what I discovered after these was that all the species to your left were exterminated by the perpetual radioactive fallout that is still ongoing. The meltdowns are still ongoing. So all the species to your left were exterminated. They were wiped out. They no longer exist. And we went back year after year to see if they recovered, and they didn't come back. These were incredible. And the reason was because, like in this model to your left, the bottom one is 27 days after the tsunami, the plume covered the whole planet. So those species are exterminated. That's why the media is pretending that they're in buildings that don't exist. And we've repeated this year after year after year after year. I was attacked and vilified and demonized for doing field studies, and I still am today. I'm literally, according to them, I'm the worst human that ever existed because I done that. I was constantly, because I was on the ocean, I couldn't defend myself, and so I was attacked relentless the entire time I was on the ocean. And today they just use software to censor me so I don't even exist. And we're showing on the Atlantic Ocean now, after all those years in the Pacific Ocean, we're showing the same thing, we were in the Atlantic Ocean. So they said that they didn't show any scientific proof, but that proof is available up on my website at thenuclearproctologist.org with the GPSs each day of where I was to. And we repeated it year after year. The species didn't come back. So they got people protesting. Fishers protest, but They don't mention Fukushima. They don't mention nuclear. They just Fisher's protest. And they barely mention anything underneath it. Against Japan's plan to discharge, but they've never stopped discharging it. It's perpetual discharge. You can't contain it. You can't put it in tanks. Civil servants are allowed to harvest cherries as side jobs in Yamagata Prefecture, which is not that far from Fukushima meltdowns. Don't eat anything from Japan. Japan's the worst place you can be buying food from. The misguided push to weaken nuclear safety standards, and Ukraine, by the way. Ukraine is a nuclear wasteland from Chernobyl, and is the biggest producer of wheat worldwide. Try wrapping your mind around that statement. The misguided push to weaken nuclear safety standards is gaining steam. This is Edwin Lyman, traitor Edwin Lyman, who's with the Union of Unconcerned Scientists. Imagine a future where experimental nuclear reactors are scattered across, we covered this lots before he did, landscapes like Starbucks in densely populated and rural areas alike. Well, that's simply not true. Imagine they're allowed to operate without thoroughly reviewed and validated safety analysts, highly trained personnel at the controls, armed security guards, any provisions for off-site emergency planning, robust containment structures that would help prevent the release of highly hazardous radioactive material if the worst happens. That's the future that many in the nuclear industry, along with their vocal supporters, are working overtime to achieve. The only bulwarks against the most dangerous proposal is the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which we call the Non-Regulatory Commission. And to say that they're an actual bulwark and say that they're independent is absurd. In charge of protecting the public, which is something they've never done. They're facing a coordinated, massive push by the industry to drastically weaken its safety security regulations and speed up the implementations of its back to the 50s dystopia vision. Nuclear power generates vast amounts of uniquely hazardous, long-lived radioactive materials. So they're not even, he's not even doing it justice. The fallout, here's what an accident actually looks like after over 16 days. So it starts hemorrhaging radiation, the radiation spreads out, it continues to come out. The emissions are extraordinary numbers per liter of rainfall. After 16 days, it covers the entire planet. What's so hard about that, Edwin? You piece of excrement, you. For nuclear power to have a chance to expand safely and reliably to help mitigate the dire threat of climate change, think about that statement now. To expand safely and reliably to help mitigate the dire threat of climate change. And climate change is caused by 80 years of these emissions. Gas, oil, and coal emissions don't create plumes that covers the entire planet in 2 weeks. Gas, oil, and coal emissions don't pulse energy at the speed of light every second for millions of years, or even at all. The only thing that does that is nuclear. It kills everything in the forest, and it starts off with the bacteria and the fungus. And guess what can't exist in a forest without bacteria and fungus, all the species. So everything ends up with a full body x-rays constantly, sterilizes it, and over years or decades, they stop reproducing. And it's like, there never was that many insects. There never was that many birds. I don't remember any birds. I heard about them from my grandma, but I don't remember them personally. For nuclear power to have a chance to expand safely and reliably to help mitigate the dire threat of climate change. Disgusting maggot. An accident like Fukushima, this time on the US soil, could sour the public on nuclear power for generations to come. Spoken like a true monster, right? Spoken like a true disgusting, despicable scumbag. For the last decade, he's the director of nuclear power safety at the Union of Unconcerned Scientists. These are absurd, degenerate scum. Fish, now this story has been circulating the whole week. Fish near Fukushima contained radioactive cesium 180 times above Japan's limit. Now it's gone everywhere. You've seen the story literally everywhere now. And the theory, what they're trying to do is convince you it's only a couple of fish and they escaped the port where the plant is to. And so they're going to put new nets there so no more fish gets out. That's what they're saying. That's what that story is actually all about. The fish were near a drainage outlet where water from melted nuclear reactors flow. Which is bizarre they said that, isn't it? Where 3 nuclear reactors melted down. That's bizarre. You notice the headline on my video is Fukushima reactor melt, because they've been using that combination for the last while, and nobody uses nuclear reactor meltdowns. It's extraordinary to see it. We had to stop using it because of censorship. It's a censored word. Fukushima's residents worry nuclear plant wastewater release in a few weeks will be another setback. Yahoo Finance. Well, but it hasn't stopped hemorrhaging into the environment. Like reactor 1 and 3, we have videos of them blowing up, but we don't have videos of reactor 2 explosion or reactor 4 explosion, or reactor 6 or the common spent fuel pool. But we know they melted down too, but they refuse to acknowledge it. Residents worry that the water discharge 12 years after could deal another setback to Fukushima's image. Now, we keep hearing that context in all the different media, where worried about their image. So this is 100% fake, right? Because real people don't talk that way. Like really, if you're on the fence, then you have to answer this question is, why are they pretending they're at the top of the building to the left? You know, and if you don't believe the urgency of what I'm talking about, I mean, you don't believe more than 2.2 grams got out, for instance, I got a suggestion for you. Hang on. All you got to do let me find we're almost there. I want to get you some choice ones. What you should do is go to Japan and mark on all of these bags. You see all the green tarps to your top center? That's all 1-ton bags. Go mark on every one of these bags that Dana is wrong. And there's 30 million of them. Dana is wrong on every one of them bags. And then go into the communities that are abandoned and get everybody's name and then publicly shame them for abandoning their communities. And don't forget to write on every one of these bags that Dana is wrong. And also write down that they're actually in the building to the left. Explain to me, you can call in 709-589-4406. Explain to me how they're able to be at the fuel pool of the building to the left if you're pro-nuclear. Deep distrust is the reason behind public anxiety. Again, they don't mention Fukushima, they don't mention nuclear, they don't show you. Like, this picture's up on my website, for God's sakes. These pictures are all up on my website. And nobody, and I mean nobody's ever used them. And the site's been there for 10 years. This is the 10th year of that site, the nuclearproctologist.org. And I feel like I'm just beginning, because we don't have another option. We don't have, and it's pretty rare for me to take a day off or not do a show. If I don't do a show, I feel guilty right up until the next show. Doesn't matter how tired I am, and I can guarantee you I'm tired. I still have to do the show, and all the stuff I'm showing you doesn't show up on my computer by itself each day. I have to go out and find all these stories and pick and choose the most important ones, read the story, capture, do the screen captures like this, get all your ducks in order, and fire up all your equipment, and et cetera, and tell that story, and do that every single night, 5 nights a week, week after week, month after month, year after 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 year. Knowing it's hopeless, but not doing it is even worse. I would never sleep again if I don't do this. I won't be able to look in a mirror if I don't do this, if I don't try. Evaporating liquid through atmospheric releases. These are dirty bombs we're talking about. So if you don't discharge it into the ocean, you want to evaporate it or boil it off or just let it... So they had 5 options. 4 of them was releasing it into the environment. 1 of it was putting it in a hole in the ground. That was the 5 options. And the IAEA verified all options. Yep, there's nothing. Well, the only thing they can do is dump it in the ocean. We can't do anything else with it. We can't store it. Why can't you store it? Well, they never stopped dumping it. They need to cover up what they've done for 12 years and will continue to do for 12,000 years. And so if they can get past this little hump and get everybody to acquiesce, then they don't have to answer for what they've done for the last 12 years and will do for the next 12,000. Compared to methods like injection into the ground, evaporation to the atmosphere, solidification, and burial, discharging nuclear contaminated water into the sea is the most convenient option. No, the buildings don't exist anymore. Like, they're pretending they're in a building that don't exist. Because they're building a story, and this is now they changed the story. Now it's 2.2 grams is all it's got. But don't worry, it's in 1,000 tanks. Don't worry, it's totally safe. All nuclear disease factories release it all the time. When do we make a stand? When do we say no? When do we have a conversation? Apparently never. It's 80 years so far without a conversation. 80% of the victims in South Korea and 60% of the victims in China felt uneasy. No, they were vehemently against the dumping, but the dumping's been going on for 12 years. Your media's job, from what we can see, is to cut your throat, and they're extremely good at it. Fukushima fallout, radioactive material was found in fish. So this showed up in all kinds of media worldwide. The same story, we've been covering it all week. And this, they're saying everything is coming from the little port in front of the nuclear power plant that's escaped the port. And that's why the fishermen end up funding it. So don't worry, it's just a couple. That's the official story now. And again, like different versions of the same story. Fukushima fish riddled with radioactivity, so they're really pushing this story now. Same as they pushed the 2.2 grams of tritium, and then they stopped saying that, but that's the official story. They're pushing this, and tomorrow or the next day they'll stop saying this, but that'll be the official story, see? Japan's bid to ease Hong Kong nuke fears. The discharge of nuclear wastewater. They must have regrouped yesterday, because yesterday when we were doing the news cycle, there was no stories whatsoever on Fukushima. So last night was basically a show on the nuclear cycle, news cycle, and which we got coming up right after this is the nuclear news cycle. From the crippled, which I find very offensive when I hear the word crippled, right? Does that look like it's crippled to anybody? To your left, does that look crippled or complete? Like, so, and they all use the same word, right? Worldwide, the media uses the same narrative to stab you in the throat. Japan's Consul General in Hong Kong, Okada Kenichi, said yesterday, the disposal into the Pacific Ocean will start, it's been going on nonstop for 12 years, will start next month and is expected to last 30 years. He said, we have not received notification of scientific grounds from Hong Kong on its proposed ban. The chief professor of mechanical engineer at City University, Hibiki Takashi, said the amount of water discharged will be 1 drop per month to the Pacific Ocean. 1 drop per month. Yeah, I was counting on the professor to cut your throat. Pretty interesting, actually. That's the new one now. Cut your throat. I'm a professor. My job is cut your throat. I can't take a day off. I'm panicking, folks. This is madness. The whole story is madness. And like when you see these stories where you got professors, they use a professor because they got credibility. Oh, that's a professor. He's not going to lie to you, Dana. And you say, oh, yeah, okay, stupid. You have a nice day. So the amount of water discharged will 1 drop per month. The chief professor of mechanical engineering at City University said the amount of water discharged will be 1 drop per month. So shut up. Stop fear-mongering. It's hard to reconcile such evil, isn't it? I gotta stick that in my pile of monsters. Another monster. South Korea professor last week, we actually had a poll about how evil he was. And he said it was the entire 1,000 tanks was equal to 3 sugar cubes going into the Pacific Ocean. But I gotta give this guy some credit though. He's pretty evil. He definitely deserves to be remembered. I'm gonna do like a tabletop game. You know, like let me see. A tabletop game, and what you got to do is you got to kill as many professors as you can, and the one that kills the most professor by the time you get through all the cards and around the board twice wins a case of pop. It's fictional, though, right? And a report by the International Atomic Energy Agency released this month was scientifically recognized. The report by the International Atomic Energy Agency released this month. So this is how they do it, right? They have their little organizations and they're the authorities. Nobody else is allowed to have any input to the equations. You can't go, okay, smarty pants. What about these buildings? How do you get 1 drop a month out of these buildings? What's your logic for that? Really, what's your logic for that, right? A city university said the amount of water discharged will be 1 drop per month to the Pacific Ocean. So shut up, fear-mongering. Being evil is just natural for him, I think, is it? Just seems to be. They don't seem to have any issues being evil. Imagine what they're doing to your children in these universities, these professors. Radioactive contamination scare threatens the fishing industry. The scare does. Here's another one. South Korea. Fish and shellfish and other marine species in Korea water cannot be contaminated by the discharge of radioactive water from the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disease factory that is likely to begin later this year, the leader of the Korea's Fishermen Association said. Even if the controversial radioactive water is released, marine species in the water cannot be contaminated by it because of the direction of the ocean current. Shut up. The current's flow alongside Japan, join the Pacific, reaches the United States, and dissipates on its way back to Hawaii. There is no way any radioactive Japanese fish can reach Korea's waters unless the current flows backwards. Haha, problem solved. Woo, lucky us. Thank God that buddy's out there to save us. He was angered by those who circulated controversial rumors that gained traction with protesters, pointing his finger mostly at the politicians from the country's opposition parties, and environmentalists who did not provide any scientific evidence. Yeah. Oh, scumbags. There's so many of them, you can't actually keep up with it. It's desperation you're seeing from them now, right? Stop asking questions. That's coming next. Stop looking at it. Stop asking questions. Hang on. There we go. Rain caused 130 schools in Korea to close. 130 schools. That was the Korean Times, by the way. Cesium-137 hotspots in Seoul, which is capital of South Korea, was emitting 1,000% more radiation to background, 1,200 kilometers from Fukushima. Radioactive iodine detected in 6 seaweed samples by South Korea, 2013. Over 6 million pounds of fish were shipped back to Japan in 2013 because of radiation. And the South Korean scientists, or University of South Carolina, the very lowest levels of radiation are harmful to life. You have to rethink exposure levels from the nuclear disease factories. A week after the gathering, representatives of the country's 2,000 scientists from South Korea Federation of Fisheries, Science and Technology Society Safety met in Seoul and checked their unified concern that the rumors, social framing, is overshadowing scientific fact, and that the public's trust in local seafood should be repaired to protect the country's 1.5 million people involved in the fishing industry and the 2,000 scientists that make a living working in it. What a statement, right? Korea's maximum radioactivity standards is 100 becquerels per kilogram, 10 times stricter than UN's Food and Agricultural Organization, which is actually at 1,000 becquerels per kilogram. And this is like right after Fukushima. The United States raised their limits to 1,000 becquerels a kilogram. EU raised theirs to 1,200 becquerels a kilogram. Japan raised theirs to 500 becquerels a kilogram, and said, well, the Americans, allow twice as much, so we're safe compared to America or Europe. Pre-Fukushima, the limits were actually 0.1 becquerels per kilogram. So every statement they make is completely dishonest. If any Japanese seafood imports, he said, are discovered radioactivity as little as 0.5 becquerels a kilogram, Korea will virtually stop importing it. But for evilness, he's way up there. That is way up there. That is ruthless what he done. There's no way the fish can get there, he said. Except I showed you the German Institute model of the radioactive fallout earlier. This model I don't really use a lot, so let's use this one. This is Xenon-133. It was 450,000 becquerels a cubic meter after Fukushima. But as you can see, not only is Japan covered in radioactive fallout, South Korea is covered in radioactive fallout. When you look at this model here, which is Norwegian Institute of Air Research, South Korea is completely covered in radioactive fallout immediately. Not later, but immediately. But it's really interesting to see how South Korea is stabbing everybody in the back. It's what they're basically telling people to stop asking questions and stop looking. This model is Neptunium-239. It shows South Korea buried in radioactive fallout in 20 days, and everybody else. So for this sack of shit to suggest there's no evidence, I'm not going to say what I want to say because it's probably illegal. McCreary County records scientists achieved significant breakthrough in a race for nuclear time. And show you this clock. This is a nuclear clock. They're going to use thorium-229 to achieve remarkable progress. So they can get this down to a millionth of a second or a billionth of a second clock, right? But you can't stop a nuclear meltdown. And you can't go there. That's why Japan has very few homeless people anymore. They murdered them at Fukushima. Meteor which exploded over the Atlantic had the force comparable to a Hiroshima bomb. Comparable to a Hiroshima bomb. And we detonated 36,000 Nagasaki bombs on this planet. Redesign of Bruce Power Visitor Center wins prestigious award. And this is Stupid of the Week award goes out to the public relation at Bruce Power, which is Dwight Irwin, Bruce Power manager of communications. Bruce Power is a Canadian-owned nuclear disease factory with the Power Workers Union and the Society of United Professionals. It's a very, very, very dangerous combination. So the redesign of this disease factory visitor center, where they brainwashed the gullible, won a prestigious award. Last year in Ontario, where Bruce Power is to they closed 750 wind and solar farms. And there was $4.5 billion for storage for renewables. They gave that to Bruce Power. And then Bruce Power is going to do storage with it for nuclear power. That doesn't make you sick to your guts. I don't know what does. It's exciting future and how nuclear power is generated. Like Dwight, you revolting maggot chew. It makes me sick when I see stuff like that. Chalk River National Laboratory, also known as the Canadian National Laboratories, which is a government entity, announced a project to significantly increase production of the latest, greatest death isotope. They said incredible potentials in late prostate cancers. So what they do to the late prostate cancers, you get them to sign this piece of paper, or any cancers when they're in terminal. They'll get them to sign this piece of paper. They'll say they're found, doctor, please, you got to do something for my loved ones. I'll sell the house and give you all the money. And the doctor's like, really? Well, there is nuclear. And so then they murder them with nuclear in the hospitals. It's an exterminating machine, the radiation in your hospitals. And you have to sign this piece of paper saying you can't sue them if your loved one dies from it. And that's what they're talking about here, so that the pharmaceutical companies can do human trials. That they've been doing this, remember back in the day with the radium? They had radium lipstick, radium makeup for children. They had radium toothpaste, radium soap, radium suppositories. And they're still using radium to murder you. You should watch that movie, The Radium Girls, if you really want to see how one of the evils that they done. It's striking because they knew what they were doing. And they had all these children. They wanted females with very small fingers. because they were putting little dots on watches, and you would lick the paintbrush each time, and then you would dip it in the radium, and you put a little dot on the watch, and it would bend the tip. And so you had to put it in your mouth and lick it again, the same brush. And so their jaws would fall off. They would be hideous, monstrous cancers. And they would accuse them of having syphilis and stuff like that. And they would die horrible, horrible deaths. Hanford cleanup. Department of Energy should consider including expedited nuclear waste treatment alternatives. And did you know that Hanford, they don't use the ALP system? Hanford, you'll love that it shows the ultimate hatred of you. So at Hanford, they have 54 million gallons and 177 tanks. And in the 50s, they dumped 450 billion gallons into the soil. 450 billion gallons is equal to 1.4 million of the same tanks. But they just spent 21 years building what's known as a glassification facility, where they're going to encase it in glass. But because of the Wigner effect, the neutron bombardment, like it does with steel and cement and everything else, it wrecks it after a few decades. Glass will go even quicker. And so the idea is they said they're going to put it in glass. Now, once you start it up, the oven for baking this stuff, they can never get in the building again. It took them 21 years to build it, and it only can last for 5 years. And then they got to wait 1,000 years to decommission it. Not that anybody will be around to see how that plays out. At least I know I won't be around in 1,000 years, unfortunately. Or fortunately, I guess. The most powerful nuclear, who wants to live to be 1,000 anymore? Most powerful nuclear explosion in history that we know about, was for the Soviet Union, was the biggest one. It was equal to 3,800 Nagasaki bombs going off. So if Russia and Ukraine exchanges 1,900 Nagasaki bombs at each other, is that a nuclear war? Is one bomb at each other a nuclear war? Yes. Is 1,900 bombs going off, 3,800 Nagasaki bombs going off at the same time a war? Yes. Is 3,800 bombs going off at the same time, Nagasaki-sized 15 kiloton bombs? Is that radioactive fallout real, or is radioactive fallout only real when there's a nuclear war? Because the bombs are the same bombs they're going to use in a nuclear war, and the radioactive fallout is the same radioactive fallout they're going to use in a nuclear war. And when you take all the nuclear bombs they emitted to, which is just one of the many ways you've released radiation into the environment, but if you look at all the nuclear bombs, that's equal to 36,000 in kiloton sizes, 36,000 Nagasaki bombs. And if you're not familiar with that, go look up Nagasaki death by radiation. Oppenheimer's glaring omissions. Yeah, the movie sanitized all the nuclear testing. They didn't have all the soldiers up facing the explosion or turning away from it and then standing up and walking to ground zero. Remember all of that stuff? They don't have all the jelly babies from Christmas Island and the Marshall Islands. The list goes, like, they took all the beautiful atolls, the Christmas Island, the French Polynesian Islands, the Marshall Islands, Montebello Islands in Australia. They took all the atolls and wrecked them permanently with radiation, every one of them. Some of them, they evaporated them. They destroyed every one of them. The Marshall Islands is at over 1 million square kilometers. Is too radioactive to live in the Marshall Islands. Any idea how many fish migrate through that area each year? Some viewers slammed Oppenheimer for failing to include Japanese voices as victims of the bombs on top of that. This is a great point, by the way. For one, it glides over the fact that the government forcibly displaced the inhabitants of multiple areas in New Mexico for a little $7 an acre for the Hispanics and $43 an acre for the Anglo-owned ranches, and $225 per acre, which is back then is a lot of money, for school property. But they actually told, like they had these tests where the plume didn't go where they thought it was going to go and went right to communities. They told the communities they had to stay in the house all day, but then they'd be okay. Of course, they couldn't be, never would be. People were at those sites and they suffered at the hands of the American government, the nuclear industry. Stories of high rates of cancer, thyroid cancers, autoimmune diseases in particular. There's 1,800 diseases and illnesses and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries, which are often related to radiation exposure. Well, of course they are. The cancer epidemic started in the 70s after a few decades of endless radioactive fallout. That's when it starts showing up where you couldn't deny it anymore. It existed, up to that point, but this was a major catalyst for 1,800 diseases. Near Trinity, after the blast, it was discovered that people have been exposed to 10,000 times the safe levels of radiation that everyone agreed on at that time. People agreed to be irradiated. And we see that at Hanford, too. Hanford released 450,000 gallons into the soil. That's actually equal to a 6-foot wide wall, 518 feet tall, wrapped around the entire planet. And it's lethal by the liter. Lethal dose is just walking past a couple of liters of it. Dumped into the soil, which flows straight into the Columbia River, which flows downriver to millions of people, and tens of thousands of farms are irrigated from. It's such an evil industry. Can't find a single redeeming quality to the nuclear industry. What was even more appalling was that the scientists and government knew the ingestion of plutonium was even more dangerous than external exposures. Of course they did. And that's an interesting thing to say it that way. Why say it that way? Because most of the calculations were based on external exposures. Rarely would they include internal exposure. It's almost unheard of back in those days to include it. According to the findings from an investigating committee appointed by Bill Clinton, we covered that on my last site that they took down when we were looking for spiders. The Manhattan Project had begun experimenting on hospital patients across the country without the patient's knowledge to assess the effects of ingesting radioactive substances. There was 800 pregnant women where they injected them or had them drink radioactive cocktails. 800 pregnant women. And when the babies were aborted or the fetuses died or the babies died a few years after they were born, they were dug back up by the government, taken to Los Alamos National Laboratory, incinerated, and they sniffed the ashes for the isotopes, because you can't destroy the isotopes, which is what they done, by the way, after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where it took approximately 4,000 irradiated Japanese back to United States National Laboratories, and what they call it ashing them, incinerating them. They don't say those words typically. They call it ashing. ASHING. And it's incinerating them. Then they sniffed the ashes for the isotopes. The absence of workers of Los Alamos' Oppenheimer's is glaring. Yeah, Oppenheimer excluded lots, didn't they? It was all about promoting nuclear. They can't put out Hollywood blockbusters that demonize nuclear. Framatones, now this is another fable where they call it accident-tolerant fuel. And so we've been following this for years. And first, they're using it at the Cloyds, at the Calvert Cliff nuclear plant in Marysland. But why is Framatome, which is Areva, basically, which is the French government, why are they shipping it? Why aren't they doing it themselves? They got lots of reactors. And it's not accident tolerant. It's basically meant to give you an extra 10 or 15 minutes before it melts down. You can't, once it starts melt, there's no such thing as accident tolerant because it can't perform if you seal it off, see? But we've covered this, right? And the media likes to call it accident tolerant fuel. But what it actually is, it just gives you an extra 10 or 15 minutes to try to contain it before it melts down. And why are they doing the first one at a U.S. nuclear power plant? The first cycle is at a U.S. nuclear plant. Why would you do it there? Oppenheimer leaves out the most terrifying, deadly risk of nuclear weapons because nobody knew about it until the 1980s, which is radioactive fallout. By the way, we've got a poll going here tonight. Should it be a crime to pretend to be at Reactor 4 and Reactor 3? Because they faked both of these reactors where they pretended they were at the top of the building to your left.
Where I'm standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
So should that be a crime for them to do it? That's what the poll is tonight. Should it be a crime to pretend that they're in Reactor 3 and Reactor 4? It's not too late to retroactively to prosecute them for doing that. It's never too late. And it's not just them, it's the producer, it's the editors, it's the owners. They are, all the world's media done this, pretend that the building didn't get hurt. Why do you think they done that? Because it's harmless? Oppenheimer leaves out the most terrifying, deadly risk of nuclear weapons. Nuclear winter. Now, the nuclear winter, which is just a theory, it's just a theory. The nuclear winter was written by, that paper was written by two people. And the United Nations loved it, just like they loved I'll show it to you. Maybe. Because that's how they've been doing this, where let me see. Here we go. So you've heard a lot about global warming, climate change, carbon footprint, and net zero, right? So you had Wallace Brocker, who's the father of global warming. You had Miles Allen, who's the father of net zero, and got a cushy job. Both of these got a cushy job after at major universities. You had the carbon footprint, which was a campaign by BP Oil to blame you for wanting oil, and that's why they had a major accident on the ocean. And that was The campaign was intended to divert attention from fossil fuel industry onto the consumers. And so the United Nations picked up all of them. And then the last one was James Hansen from Disgusting Maggot from NASA, who gave a single 15-minute speech in 1988 to Congress, and that was weaponized against the population of the entire planet. It is an important turning point in the history of global climate change, and that it marked the official beginning of a global warming policy debate with his testimony. So you had James Hansen, BP, James Hansen with climate change, BP Oil with carbon, Miles Allen with net zero, and Wallace Brocker with global warming. Right? And that's how they done it. They took those 4 papers and then weaponized them against the population. And then the nuclear winter, which is a paper by 2 people, I can't remember their names off the top of my head, has been used in all kinds of movies and everything else. But we had nuclear wars. They used 36,000 Nagasaki weapons on this planet already. That's a nuclear war. The skies didn't disappear. But there's not nuclear winter, it's nuclear heat, see? And so they need to blame the heat on you, your tin cans, your pop bottles, your cardboard. But the actual heat is generated by invisible plumes that covers the planet for millions of years, and there's a new one every day, pulsing energy at the speed of light every second. The Aboriginal Australians defeated the nuclear dump. We touched on that last week. And this was at the Kimba site, which we covered that in 2015 and after, when the nuclear industry wanted to build in Australia, wanted to put a deep geological repository there. But it's for medical isotopes. Deep geological repositories for the isotopes they're putting in you, your loved ones, and killing you with. After you're dead, they want to take that stuff and put it in a deep geological repository. If you knew how evil the nuclear industry actually was, you'd probably be afraid to leave your house again. No nuclear facilities for vulnerable coastline, Alaska regulators say. Yeah, but you didn't say that to the nuclear industry. So eVinci, remember the DaVinci software and everything? Very popular, right? So you stole the name, eVinci micro reactors. Energy everywhere it's needed. And they got these little badges for the children, I guess, or something. These are, you can build a small nuclear reactor in Alaska, but not within a kilometer of a house. Microreactors designed to function as single, sealed, modular, that could be transported on the back of an 18-wheeler. We've heard all of these fantasy stories before. The reactors can't be built within 2,700 feet of residence, 300 feet of a national park or game reserve, in a coastal area vulnerable to storm surges, or within 100 feet of a public road or trail, or in an area protected because it's used for drinking water. The radioactive fallout gets everything. They're running on mixed oxide fuel on top of that, and they don't exist. They don't even have a design into the regulatory agencies to be approved. It's completely fiction, but that's the progress, that's the process that they like to use. So they don't want you to think of geothermal or renewables. They want you to think of micronuclear reactors. They want your country, your province, your states to sign a memorandum of understanding so that you don't look at anything else and hope that one day to get the kinks out of it and actually get one to work. You're many, even if they succeeded today, they have to build it, run it, get the kinks out of it, redesign it, build it, run it, get the kinks out of it, before you can consider production. And to do production, like first off, you got to bring mixed oxide fuel to these facilities, these production sites. The whole story is ludicrous. Israel nuclear scientists threatened to resign from Dumoa. I mean, like, they were dumping their waste in Gaza, for God's sakes. Disgusting parasites. Japan sees a record drop in population. As the world's second, you hear, like, Craig the troll, you see his comments all the time where he'll say, like, Japan's completely safe. People live to be the oldest people in the world are in Japan. They live to be the oldest. No, the young people are not being born since Fukushima. Last year was 800,000 births, the lowest since records began. And last month, Kishida, the current idiot president or prime minister of Japan, unveiled a $25 billion plan to get them to have more kids. Of course, there's 865,000 extra cancers in the first year. It's all over for those people. They're being eradicated, and they don't even know it. It's such a shitty day. I feel a bit better we got through a show anyway. We'll close the poll off. 46 votes. Should it be a crime? Well, I'm going to wait till we got 50, actually, and 40 likes. Should it be a crime to pretend Fukushima Reactor 3 and Reactor 4 still had fuel pools post-meltdowns? Actually, I might do a shout-out, I think. I haven't done a shout-out this week, I don't believe. Let's do a shout-out. We're hoping to get an extra 4 votes on the poll and an extra like. So we got a couple of nice even numbers. But it's hard to appreciate how many scumbags we cover in this show, right? That guy's a real scumbag, obviously. He says was he the guy who said just a one drop? The disposal will start next month. Lasts for 30 years. Yeah, the professor of City University will be 1 drop per month into the Pacific Ocean, despite the fact
My understanding is
the billies don't even exist anymore. Like, there's so many scumbags, you actually can't keep up with it. I mean, you picked up 30 million one-ton bags, but only 1 drop is going to get out a month. You can see why I get upset sometimes, right? It's hard to believe that this industry actually exists. Let's do a shout out here. How's the poll? We're still at 46 votes. We need 4 more votes on the poll, folks. Come on. You can do it. Let's do a shout out while we're waiting. Stephen Young, Charlie voted no. Hi, Stephen. John Shiflett, Maritime Slave, Starlight, Dana Nasana. Yeah, good night, Dana. Nabi. Good night, everybody. Peaceware, John Curtis, Darren James Spencer. Radish. Jeff Poor, Brian S. Angel's Place. Nick Moulton. I know Colette is out there somewhere. Tripwise got a new song out, he says. Or he's about to anyway. Mo Outtakes says howdy. Another CG. James Lucid. Maritime Slave Richard McCann. Fast Thinker. Ocean temperatures off Florida is 101 degrees. Holy shit, eh? Wow. That's heartbreaking, actually. We have 47 thumbs up. We're hoping to get 3 more thumbs up. We're hoping to get 1 more like and 3 more thumbs up over here. So we got a nice even 40 votes. Is that going to happen tonight? Or am I dreaming? Remind everybody, if you don't know, donate. I don't know how you expect me to get anything done. We raised 50 in the last 2 weeks. That's not going to fund this huge operation. And this operation is pretty old now, so we're having huge troubles. One plus is a lot of the stuff I ordered in showed up. Finally, it took forever. And at least I can get a few things done, but the nuclear industry got $1 billion to stab us in the back, and we are struggling just to try to fight back. It's just not fair. It's absurdly frustrating for me because I can't get anything accomplished. We're so far behind, we might never get caught up. I don't know what to do. They took down my other site. My other site, it was easy to raise the money to fix something, right? Or just to keep expanding the operation. Thank goodness we made it this far anyway, I guess. I'm still at 39 votes, 39 likes, and 47. I guess I'm going to have to be happy with that, am I? We still got 3 minutes left. We got 40. I got one part of it. We got 40 likes. Excellent. I'd like to get 3 more votes, but that's really good. 48 votes. Need 2 more. 2 more. Still got a couple minutes left. Let's waste them. I think we got 2 minutes left or something before we hit the 2-hour line. See if we can get another 2 votes on the poll. Because that's a great poll. And that's a fantastic poll. Should it be a crime to pretend that Fukushima Reactor 3 and Reactor 4 still had fuel pools after the meltdowns? Yeah, we got 49, 49, 50, 50, 50. I think 50. I hear 50. I got 42 likes and 49 votes. We're so close. We just need 1 more vote. 1 more vote on the poll. Come on, give us a vote. We have 42 likes, and which exceeded my 40 hopes. Now we got to try to get 1 more vote on the poll. We can't end the show until we get 1 more vote on the poll. Come on, give us a vote out there. If you just joined us, give us a vote on the poll. We need 1 vote. We just need 1 vote. 1 vote. Yep, Colette's here. How are we doing? Did we get 50 yet? No, we're still waiting for one vote on the poll. We want 50 votes before we call it a night. It's midnight we're on to. It's midnight. It's 11:59. We got another minute. Can we get one vote in the next minute? It's a pretty important question. Can we do it? Does it mean anything? Is it a crime to want to get 50 votes on the poll? Is that a crime that I'm guilty? I am guilty if that is a crime. So while we're waiting for a vote, we got it. Vote 50. There she blows. Vote 50. Woo! Let me explain to you how to donate, folks. You click the video you're watching right now. I'm just going to stop it. Scroll down underneath it. Click on more. Scroll all the way down. There's a link to the PayPal and a link to the nuclear proctologist. So at the nuclear proctologist, which is the website, you can donate with literally, just go down to that donate button right there. So scroll down and there's the donate button. You can donate, just click on that with just about any kind of credit card. And you'll see I take all of these cards and then some. Literally almost any credit card will work at my site at thenuclearproctologist.org. And you can, that's my direct to my PayPal. So if you click on that, you're directly at my PayPal itself. You don't have to look for it. And if you go to my website and you scroll down, you got all the pictures. Just click on the picture and you can download these. You can print them out and give them to your friends. Print them out and give them to your fishery officers. And if you come on down a little bit further, you got all the pictures of the reactors. So if you just click on it, print them out and drop copies off at your local engineering companies, your local architectural companies. Go to your universities and pass them out. Make booklets. Make 100 of these little booklets of these pictures and ask them why they're silent. And there's so much more at my site that it's hard to comprehend. Scumbag Arnie Gunnarsson. You got all kinds of different pictures. You got all the research expeditions. And at the top of the page, this is the first page you'll get when you go there, the nuclear proctologist, is headlines from the nuclear proctologist and my merchandise shop. You can click on that, and that'll take you over to the merchandise shop. And I still got, because we sold quite a few Calm Down Charlie shirts. You keep that up for a little bit longer. You got Radioactive Followed Ellie shirts. You got mugs and jackets. We got you covered. And Save the Insects, ban nuclear power. Save the Children, ban nuclear power. And they come with convenient pictures on the front and the back. Save the Children, ban nuclear power. And on the back, hard to imagine something more frightening than 5-year-olds marching off to irradiated school playgrounds. And then you can go over to the headlines, which is just headlines from the nuclear proctologist. And we got lots of wonderful stories there to freak you out. And so just click on these. I'll probably find a better one for you. The Canadian can-do reactors. That video is worth watching, by the way. That's a 3-hour video on the Canadian reactors. That's one of the most frightening reactors on the planet. That's a catastrophic death machine. Okay, so we're going to close the poll, I guess. We got 51 votes and 42 likes. Woohoo! Awesome. That's so awesome. Thank you, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night. Have a great day tomorrow. And we'll see everybody tomorrow night. Tomorrow night is Thursday. It's the last show of the week. That's the last show of the week. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Have a great day tomorrow. Great night tonight. Hugs for you and your friends and your families and your loved ones. You got to learn to fight back. I'm not going to be here forever. The world has to fight back against this industry. You got to find the courage and the fortitude, and everything else will come with it. It's okay to fight back. It's the right thing to do. Have a great night. I'll see everybody tomorrow night.